Hi, everybody. Achilles Justice here with the Philosophy Society. It's August 7th, 2024. So Wednesday. We're in the Toronto Metropolitan University Library, room 860. It's a good room. We have some people in the room. There's some people online already. And obviously YouTube later. So today is going to be a bit of a different day. We're going to go back to what we used to do last year. I'm going to do like an improv kind of thought discussion and go through some ideas, and you guys can join in and we can talk about it. I'm going to use the board. So yeah, let's get our position here. And then,
so when you talk about God, like before.
Well, when I talked about God, I had a presentation. This is just me. I'm going to write on the board.
Okay.
Right. So this is if you look at the videos from last year, I was doing this all the time.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this is kind of like I don't want to use free association or Freud sense, but we're going to talk about some stuff. So we have the Philosophy Society, and that's where we are. That's the social context of our situation here. You know, not that it's like part of the Philosophy Society on its own, but free speech definitely is within the category, right, of the Philosophy Society. It's something that there's a degree of like being respectful to each other, but the idea of censorship in some ways is not something that is going to be fruitful for growth, right? I'm bringing this up in the sense that we have this phenomena of cancel culture, and or how do we define cancel culture? Basically, it's just like almost a mob mentality or groupthink of someone that has either done an ethical or a moral violation, and that person is now ostracized or scapegoated from society, right? But it's not a specific individual that's deciding this, or even an objective standard that is being applied to a specific case, right?
Can you give an example?
So an objective standard to a specific case would be something like the criminal justice system. There's an impartial judge that doesn't know you personally and has no personal interest. The interest of the judge and everybody else would be the rule of law, that no one is above the law.
The facts,
right? And the process of the legal proceedings is to distill out the best we can, removing bias, to determine what occurred, if some violation occurred, and then there's a standardized like sentencing or series of consequences.
I don't understand this part. What's this related to cancel culture?
So cancel culture is, what did I just say? So cancel culture is like it has a mob mentality property or groupthink. Whenever there's a deviation from the group's norms or values, or a perceived violation of an ethical standard, right?
Okay.
And so this is not objective, but it does have consequences, okay? So someone, for example, I'll give something that I could be canceled for right now. If I was going to talk about the science of gender dysphoria, right?
Gender dysphoria, what is that?
Gender dysphoria is an individual gets very negative feelings or emotions because of the gender that they're assigned at birth. It's not even really being assigned a gender. It's just that you're born male or female biologically. And some people's identity is in contrast to their biological sex. And that creates this sense of dysphoria. And so it's not that someone that feels that they're a woman is actually a woman. They're just a man that makes themselves look like a woman so that they don't have that experience of dysphoria. But I would still criticize, is that experience of dysphoria really gone? Because at a very fundamental level, you can't change what you are. Like me being, my grandfather was Italian, right? That's just the nature of where I was born into. I can't change that. I can change the story and try to be delusional and say it didn't occur, but that's not real, right? So A psychological approach would be that people that are in transition are suffering from a mental illness, which would be gender dysphoria. And so me saying that, hello, I can be canceled for that, quote unquote.
You can be canceled on that. What do you mean you can be canceled? What does cancel in this
Yeah.
case mean to you?
So there would be some negative consequences to my profession. For example, Jordan Peterson, you know, having to go through like social media training or whatever it was, or, you know, having problems with the University of Toronto, and then in some ways not politely being asked to leave or being pressured to not teach there anymore because of his explicit activism against legislating pronoun use, right? Which goes in contrast to free speech. That was that whole thing. It lasted for years. Now he doesn't really talk about it as much anymore, right? But it made him famous in a lot of ways. And so Jordan Peterson is an example.
Is that some legal consequence, or it's just like
No, well, there could be. If someone could, like cancel culture, if you do like a Venn diagram, there can be an overlap, right? They're not mutually distinct, right? Where there's like nothing in between. There could be a situation where someone did commit a crime, right? That is illegal, and it violates social and ethical norms, and people get upset about it, and then, you know, they push to have this person removed or whatever's going on.
And cancel culture could be also the consequence of a revolution. For example, a revolution, someone in a dictatorship, and said, okay, we should change and somehow. Karl Marx, it could be one example. Gandhi, this kind of thing, people, it's not leadership, I mean.
Yeah, it's in a certain way. So, for example, someone that speaks out against Putin, right? There could be a group of individuals that like dethrone that person or deplatform them, right? That's one of the other consequences is the deplatforming, which means that you're like removed from social media.
Remove social media.
Like you get kicked off of Instagram, you get kicked off of Facebook. People don't do interviews anymore. They don't allow you to speak anymore. They take away your free speech. And part of the problem with like cancel culture in that regard, especially the deplatforming element, is that even like people say false things frequently. Like, for example, like confusions about like coronavirus, or like whether the earth is flat or not, right? Or if ghosts exist, like pseudoscience, you know?
Yes.
And the solution is not to isolate the person and cut them off from society. The solution is really just to educate them. Say, well, this is not true. This is what really is the case. And then it puts the onus on educators. Like I take a position of an educator in some ways, right? And my authority, if you want to say, or expertise is in my competency to demonstrate information to people in such a way that they understand it now, that they've gained some defendable knowledge that they can take on their own, and they can say, this is what I feel or think or believe, and I can explain it because I learned it from this person. I'm modeling off what they said. That's what teachers are supposed to do, right?
That is the same, for example, in China with Mao Zedong. The solution for someone not in the group and not a ship is re-education. A camp of re-education. We take this one. It's the fear, and you should follow the people, the leader, the mindset of this.
Oh yeah,
dictator.
I
Re-education.
understand what you're saying.
So the we have like a group of people, right? Like we'll just do like a bunch of little things here. And there's a certain like norm. People like they believe in a certain belief system, and there's a variance within this belief system, right? You know? And somebody might just go way out here. This is like a graph. It's like these are like two different images here. Someone like goes way out here to this graph, and they're outside of the general group, right? The the way that individuals in some ways facilitate their in-group, out-group bias is to just remove someone that thinks differently than them. Right? But that it doesn't give, again, it goes back to the free speech principle that if we allow bad ideas to persist, then we can at least criticize those bad ideas and we won't prevent good ideas from not coming out at all. Right?
So, because this is related to the subject of free speech, first of all, before educating, can a person have the right to say that, for example, the Earth is flat? Is it falling into free speech?
So let's do an example here, right? So we have free speech and we'll do some examples. So example 1, the flat Earth. Okay. So you said, do they have the right to say that?
Mhm.
Well, if it's a free speech thing, then yes. Right? When I was a kid, I grew up in a Roman Catholic educational system in Ontario. And there are just some things that you can't even, like, because it's indoctrination
Mhm.
and it's dogmatic, you can't even ask questions. You can't ask questions that would frame the belief system in a way that it may not be true. You can be confused, right? Because like you're stupid or you just don't understand the word of God or you don't understand with scripture, right? There's something wrong with you. There can't be something wrong with the scripture itself, right? And so cancel culture, in some ways, what is the goal? Like if there was a good thing about it, I'm going to come back to this in just a second. Like what would the goal be? Like if we're a group of people and then someone does something bad, you know, it could be a bunch of different, doesn't really matter. Okay, but yeah, okay, go ahead, Dodgy. Yeah, sure.
Regarding cancel culture, it's like when you asked what good can it serve, for me personally, I view it as a way of like the community regulating itself, where when we had a period of, extreme free speech and extreme intellectual freedom, it leads to kind of development of a very diverse set of, ideas and beliefs, and it just makes the culture very rich. But at the same time, I think we enter a period due to, like assimilation or whatever, where people would want less of that diversity and would want things to become more kind of like dilute. Or by I mean dilute is just something more universal, like something they have in common. So they kind of kill out everything else until one identity is left. Does it make sense? I don't know.
Yeah. For sure. Regulation, assimilation, right? A sense of justice, even like if some wrong has been done, then we as a group or a tribe, we say, we're gonna, that's where I talk about ostracizing and scapegoating.
But you say, but who defines the wrong? Who defines what is wrong?
Yes, very good. Okay, so what did I say here? Sense of justice. It's good to have all the points on the board. Okay, we'll go to that. Let's go back to the flat earth thing. So does the person have the right to discuss this? Right to say your belief, right? And this goes to like the philosophy of human rights. And human rights.
Wasn't that in 1982 or some year, Canada has passed a charter of
Rights and freedoms?
Hmm?
Charter of Rights and Freedoms?
Yeah, something like
I'm not, maybe. I know there's a charter. I'm not sure when it was passed, but sure.
yeah. So they kind of, just talk about free speech, they talk about conscience, freedom of conscience.
Okay.
Like related to you can believe on whatever you want to believe, right? And then the government cannot. There's a charter.
Yeah.
A chart for that.
We could look at that.
Yeah.
That's a good example. That's where it's legislated in.
Yeah.
And rights are something that we have to uphold
Mhm.
because rights are not universal in nature,
Mhm.
right? Like that's why we had to create them and then enforce them, right? And so free speech as a right is something that has to be enforceable and explicated. Like you have to say it. It's not just assumed, And so the right to talk about a flat earth only certain social contexts will that right even exist. Because we can take the flat Earth example, and then we can like go like, you know, problems with Putin. You know, or the Kremlin, or like the war in Ukraine. And this whole thing, you would not allowed to be able to communicate that at all
Sure.
in Russia. They would come in here and drag me away and you wouldn't see me again. And maybe I would die in a fucking prison, right? Not cool. So when you say, do you have the right to say it? You have the capacity to say things, right? Whether it's accepted, right? So one is like capacity to speak. Someone cuts out my tongue, I can't speak. I could write things down maybe, or if I get enough brain damage, I might lose faculties altogether, right? So capacity is one. And then the acceptance or tolerance of the social group would be another property. The capacity goes on the individual. But then there's the tolerance or acceptance, which is a social thing. So cancel culture is not really an individual thing at all. It's the fact that the group will not tolerate, now this goes to your next point, beliefs that deviate from whatever norm that specific group has. And so, like Elon Musk talks about the woke mind virus.
Woke by virus?
Yeah. Which in some ways is what cancel culture really is that if you don't agree with DEI,
deviation,
diversity, equity, and inclusion.
diversity includes
Equity and inclusion.
equity.
Now, DEI is really just the contemporary way of saying we need to regulate racism, right? And make it so that people are not being prevented from getting jobs or functioning within society because of some perceived ethnicity.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, and I say perceived ethnicity is because you can't just like, when people talk about black, white, if they use color to designate ethnicity, that doesn't even really make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's people of all colors from all places of the planet,
Sure.
right? Like the color of your skin at this globalized state has nothing to do with where you were born from. Your genetic heritability might have a lineage to a specific area where people evolved in some way, right? But it's a different thing than, you can't just say because this person is, I perceive this, they're from that place, right? And so his argument for DEI is that we want to, the most successful societies and businesses will base their hiring practices, for example, on a meritocracy.
Okay.
Right? So it's not about representing specific individuals, right? And the diversity part, it's for his argument is basically just that if you want to be successful in life, we need to look at those that have the greatest merit and not exclude people because of some perceived difference. Right? I think when we go back to what is the goal, that's really what it's trying to get at. Right? And it's in its strongest sense. Right? We can try to attack it, the idea from, but we don't want to have like a weak, we don't want to characterize it in a weak way.
So is Elon Musk support or not support DEI? What's his?
He does not.
He does not support.
It's not that he doesn't support it. He would, again, it depends on what you mean by it. If you mean modern DEI or contemporary DEI is a means to prevent exclusionary racism, for example, to not hire somebody because of some perceived like difference, that is that would be a good use of DEI. If they did have merit, right? Like let's say they're an expert in the field, but they're from Antarctica, and you're like, I don't want to hire people from Antarctica. They're too close to the penguins, right? That's racist. And so if DEI it removes that exclusionary move, that's a good thing. But that's not necessarily his argument. That's not necessarily what it's doing, right? What it's doing is it's lowering standards for testing, for example, when you get credentials. So if you're a doctor, again, we could criticize his argument. His argument was basically that the standards for being accepted or getting the credentials of some profession are lowered to make it more inclusionary. And that would be a fault of DEI because it would be reducing the integrity of the merit of the people that are participating, right? Alternatively, it would make more sense to just bolster the education and support so that people that may be unrepresented are just more educated. They just have more merit now. I mean, and instead of, right, you can go the other way. Like, why would you lower the standards of quality for education or testing when you can just increase the quality of education, and then those unrepresented groups would just be more educated in themselves, right? And then it would just make more, it wouldn't violate the meritocracy point. Anyways, DEI is one of those things. The other problem that he personally had an issue with was his son was depressed, and there was an issue of, he just spoke about this recently in an interview. And he says he was lied to by the physicians that he had to sign a waiver allowing his son to go through a gender reassignment process, whether it's hormone therapy. I'm not sure how far his son went. And if he didn't, then his son would die because he would commit suicide. And so it's not the gender dysphoria that's the problem, it's the depression that's the issue, right? And so if a professional is, because a parent, if they're faced with a life or death situation, that's a very challenging situation to deal with. And in this context, he feels that his autonomy was taken away because he was not informed about what was really going on. That's one criticism he could make. And that his state of mind, he didn't have the freedom to choose because it was a life or death. It was presented as a life or death situation. And
sorry, I didn't understand this son's part. What's the issue here?
his son was below the age of 18, I guess, and wanted to go through a gender transition process. And so needed to get his parents' consent to either whether it would be hormone therapy or gender reassignment surgery, right? And the problem, and psychologists talk about this too, is that you're not addressing the underlying mental health condition before you address the trans property, whatever that might be, or gender dysphoria. And so it might, like when we look at the correlation causation issue, it might not be that the gender transition is the cause of the depression. We don't know that actually. It could be something else. And when you look at longitudinal studies in Scandinavian countries, people that went through transition after 10 years and those that didn't, there was no difference in their subjective well-being reports.
That's right. But in this case, for example, in general society, I said in Latin, opus lopus is lomus. The man in general is the wolf of the men. Okay. Lopus, homus, lopus. Society usually try to attack you. So in this case, I think you have two kind of attitudes. You could be as a victim, or you could be as a warrior. As a victim, you have depressions. You need AIDS. You need some kind. As a warrior, you try to fight. Someone's kind. I feel aggressed against some community. I try to go to the mayor and I say, hey, for example, my community has any issues. We need solutions. Other people say, no, we have nothing to do. So these kind of things in the society, if you consider in this society as a wolf of men, you can see what can you do. You are in this, and if you are in a free speech, you have the freedom to fight against any kind of injustice.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So. Yeah. So they
should look at the depression issue before they use the gender transition as a method, right?
Yeah, before jumping to surgery or therapy
Okay.
that will irreversibly damage someone's reproductive system, for example,
Right.
and they cannot have children anymore,
Right.
it would make sense to
find out what's the real reason, what's the
deal with the depression
Deal
first,
first.
right? Another interesting piece of information is 40% of people that are in transition are autistic.
autistic.
So how do we know that it's not autism? And that's
Hmm.
excluding the depression factor or other mental health issues, right? So before going through a life-altering, forever changing decision, when you're not even competent to drive, or you can't drink alcohol, you're not legally an adult, your brain's not fully mature, and if you have a mental illness, that means you're not of sound mind either, right? So again, this conversation, I'm going on the free speech thing, but some people, like certain trans extremists or activists, they will not even be able to listen to the information I'm saying. I'm not saying it in a way to be disrespectful. I'm saying it in a way to understand what is going on, right? To understand nature. And so when we go back to these diagrams I used to do, there's the human being, and then there's its environment.
Okay. They can understand, but they can't accept.
We go back to this. There's the tolerance and acceptance,
Tolerance.
right? And so there's a specific norm or set of beliefs or what membership is to be in this group. And if you go too far out, then you can be subject to cancel culture, right? And there's certain religious communities like the Hutterites that if you deviate from their religious beliefs, they will excommunicate you. And that's not ethical, right? Like it's not ethical to remove an individual's social life because what's happening is the belief is more important than the human being. And that doesn't really make sense in this context, right? Like we would think that human well-being is more important than the content of some beliefs. Now you could argue that human well-being is a content belief, and we think have some analytic confusions here, but
Yeah, can I chime in here? Yeah, sure. This actually remind me because on the theory of justice by John Ross, they talk about the two principles from the veil of ignorance.
okay,
The first principle is the principle is every person should have the rights for freedom of speech, freedom of conscience. He said that the only reason that you can limit freedom is to promote this principle. For example, like in a discussion, in a meeting, you need to have a procedure for speaking.
sure.
And this seems limit some freedom of each individuals. But why we allow this is because this limitation actually is for the purpose of promoting or supporting the free speech. Other than that, that's the only justification that you can limit some freedom to promote the first principles. So that's that I don't know if it is related to what you talk about here, when you cancel someone is only for the sake of to promote free speech. It's not for some other purpose.
It's an end in itself.
Yeah. So
It's not a means to an end, but
Yeah.
there is a means to an end to it as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
So you cannot use any reason other than promoting free speech to limit the freedom. That's what he says. Yeah.
But freedom is what is absolute freedom.
Mhm.
Because for you, freedom could be totally different for me. So in one example.
He said that he looked at he has a view point for freedom. He thinks freedom for John Ross is a system, is a social, is a political system that it's not like just one thing. It's like it's all things work together. Free speech, conscience, freedom. You also have rights. Everyone has a right to vote, to express themselves. He looked at it's like freedom is a system that collaborating, all these elements, so to work together. So that's what. So the example I give is you need to have a limitation on who can speak first or how many minutes. But with you make this procedure with the sole purpose is to help facilitate the free speech. It's not for some other like who's more powerful or what should be the right. No, it's only for that. That in that case you can because otherwise it will be chaos. Everybody, you say, I say, then nobody can hear
There has to be some standard.
Yeah, have some
or
standard.
procedure
Yeah.
to allow optimal free speech.
Right.
It's not just like speaking on impulse or being react. And that's what. So this is good, right? So to have there needs to be some process or procedure to optimize. So yes, I agree with you. And this goes into part of the practices and methodology of the Philosophy Society, right? Of this philosophy school that I'm trying to put together or whatever, So there is some methodology or process here, okay? And some of the properties that I've discussed is reasoning, an understanding of evidence, which is another way of talking about science or being scientific, right? You can't just and so what that means is that you can allow an idea like the flat earth, but then we have some objective standard to evaluate those ideas. And that's fundamentally what it means to be philosophical, right? Reading Nietzsche, just reading it, there's a difference between being a philosopher and then being a student or someone that is interested in philosophical ideas. We're doing good though. With did you watch part of the one where I explain what the group is about?
I'm not up to date at all.
Okay.
I looked and realized I could make it here today. It was not planned. If I planned, I would have prepared. So this is an unplanned. I can just listen.
I'm happy you're here.
Yeah.
So the Philosophy Society, I'll do a quick introduction. Again, you guys know this before. Philosophy Society is basically like a wise group. Philosophy is the love of wisdom. And so as individuals and as a group of people, there are certain things we can do that would constitute wisdom. Wisdom defined as the quality of our beliefs, decisions, judgments, actions, being reasonable, living a good life, not having a mental illness, for example. And I have a certain definition for what a mental illness is, something that you can do something about, right? A neurological disorder is not a mental illness. It's like a biological, physical thing. And so the Philosophy Society is predominantly it's practical philosophy. So it would be what can we do in our lives to live well that would be wise, right? And religion is predominantly has taken this practical approach towards things. They tell you what to do. They make prescriptions. This is how you're supposed to live your life. But the problem is that they're just not really based in science. And a lot of the times it's incoherent. It doesn't fit together very well. And you're required to have faith in usually a God and believe the person that's explaining the stuff that God has told you, right? And so all of that information can fly in the face of ethics and what's good for you. And it just might not be, in a lot of cases, it was not made or equipped to deal with the problems of life. It doesn't match on to wisdom very well. Going back with reasoning and mental health and the quality of judgments, those kinds of things. So the Philosophy Society is meant to do that. And so the way to do that, and the way I'm doing it, is I'm on my 5th degree, basically. And I teach some stuff in psychology and the mechanism or process of being philosophical, in the sense that we can learn to live a better life that way. Individually, like for you, you can do that. But then as a group, So if I do something that's unwise, I've taught everyone to be aware of that lack of wisdom or me being foolish, and then you can make me aware of it. That way I can correct my behavior. That's the best way, right? And as human beings, we're fallible and we don't, we have our biases and limitations. So only through some sort of a feedback-based group context can we become our best.
Mhm.
And that's, I guess, the purpose of the group, right? And so there's certain books that I have been teaching. We're going through the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People right now. We're about halfway through. A previous book we went through is called Feeling Good. That goes to the mental health part. It's how to regulate, or not regulate, but how to be aware of our beliefs so that we don't create negative emotions and become depressed. We did a study on the book. 70% of people that read the book basically became cured of depression, that were mildly depressed and whatnot, because they learned to be aware of their patterns of thinking and their behavior, and then they modified that. So it's the philosophy of CBT. Today, we're talking about, I'm doing a different kind of approach. This is David's first time. I like this approach better, the Socratic approach, right?
Yeah.
Because we're exploring the ideas, and you're getting to see me almost as like a philosophical scientist think through things and how we can relate ideas together and be aware of certain ideas and then kind of make sense of it. And that's one of the ends of philosophy. That's what we're doing, is to make sense of things. So that was my introduction.
So going back to your, you talk about basically like a principle of philosophy, so like using reasoning. So understand. So let me see. How do you deal with if people have different opinions, some controversy topics? If you see, like within the, how people can. So what's the bottom line? What's the principle that people have different opinion can still hold on, can still discuss, can still have a productive discussions?
Well, okay, so we're gonna get to that. So we have the human being, right, or the perceiver,
Mhm.
right? So this is the person doing the perceiving. Okay, and there's not just one of you, so you're perceiving stuff. It's like your field of view. And so if something happens out here, you're not really going to be aware of it because it's out of your field of view. But lucky, there's more than one of us, right? There's a whole bunch of people. And they all have their respective fields of view, right? They're all perceiving something. They're all looking in different directions. And in that way, collectively, we kind of get like a totality of, or the unwealth, what our species can be aware of, right? And so there's your sensory perception. There's also the mind. And that's where language comes in and belief comes in. And because language and belief is representational in contrast to perceptual, right? Like I can perceive the board smooth. It's nice. It's a little cold, right? But that's different than thinking about what the board is from here. I'm like thinking about it, right? And so we have to test out the thinking part, the belief part, not only to the environment or reality. If you take all the people out, which is you, the being, that's fine. But there still has to be some mechanism of like quality control for the accuracy of your beliefs and that which you perceive. And that goes back to understanding evidence, right? Which is basically just what science is again, right? Is this really a carpet? I could get down, I could smell it. I don't think the smell would really matter, I could there's certain things I could do to test whether or not it's a carpet. Like if you're looking from very far away and I couldn't see the fibers from here, I can see the fibers, it could maybe be tile. I don't really know, right? But if I get close enough, now I have more data exposed to me. I'm like, oh, okay, it is a carpet. That is what it is, right? And so reasoning, so actually it's interesting. The first part, the reasoning part, that's predominantly a mode of being philosophical that we use to understand beliefs with language, right? And then the understanding of evidence, that's how we're kind of doing our perceptual stuff. You get some data, You're like, is this really the case? You know, and you're like, I don't know. And then I get more data. And I'm like, is it the same? Right? And then you go out and you go look and see if there's gold in the river. Like, Achilles, there's no gold in there, buddy. Maybe you were really drunk last time. I don't know. Maybe you peed in the river and thought that was the gold. It's not the gold, right? And so there's all of these functions or properties of what makes good science. And really just the purpose of that is to make sure that if you perceive something, it actually really is there. So we go back to this belief. See, it all like fits together. Because it makes sense. That's why it fits together. If it's contradictory, you're like, what are you talking about, man? Okay, so the flat earth thing. So someone's like, I perceive this thing that we live on called Earth. Okay, which in some ways, let's try to make sense of this belief. It's like, okay. So number one, how flat is it? Is it imperceptibly flat?
Imperceptibly, what does it mean?
I mean, I can't even see. So if I draw a line, or like if you see something on a plane, right, there's a width to this, right? But when you say the flat earth, is it just that like there's just two sides and it's just a 2D object? There is nothing, you know, like what would be the flat side? Like where on the planet, like if you looked at a circle, you could say that like this is the flat side of the coin, right? But where's that on the map? That's the first thing that doesn't make sense. Because if it really was like an object shaped like this is like, you know, you're just like flipping it, then we would have like, there'd be like mountains and stuff. You'd be able to see the mountain. But then there'd be like protrusions from here that would be like right here. And it would be the same thing, right? But that's not really the case, right? So the way that people will justify beliefs like a flat earth idea is they use these reasoning fallacies, these sneaky little tricks to not falsify the belief, right? So we talked about this like 30 minutes ago. The belief becomes more important than the believer. And they sacrifice their human dignity in some ways, their capacity to know the truth, to make sure that the belief doesn't get removed. And that's a psychological phenomenon. That's the individual's inability to disregard the belief. And some people are more prone to delusional thinking. That's what delusional thinking really is, right? And yeah, and so that's bad. We don't want to do that, right? Because what's going on is the human being is creating all of these linguistic explanations of its environment, but it's not real. For example, ghosts, right? When I was like 14, like when I was a kid, this movie called Ghostbusters came out, and I was like, yes, this is the best thing ever. It was good back in the day. It's okay now. And at least the newest one's okay. There was a really bad one that was like a wolf mind virus. It was just what are you guys doing? So people believed in it, right? Like I had, when I was like a teenager, like a young teenager, there was other people in my social group that were like, yeah, ghosts are real. Now they could be saying that like just to be like, I'm trying to make you feel weird, you know, that there's this thing that I know that doesn't exist, but I'm going to try to convince you that it does to see how stupid you are, maybe, or to put fear in you, or to exercise some power over you because I know something that you don't. Like that could have been existing, or they could have genuinely really believed that ghosts are real. Why would they believe that?
But this is a good question. Is in this case, okay, the Earth is flat, no discussion because it's science. We have Galileo Galilei, the sun around the Earth, or around, no, it's science. But you talk something about ghosts. What do you think about angels?
Okay.
No. In this case,
Sure.
it's not science. You can't prove one angel, for example, Gabriel.
Sure.
There's a very big Michael.
Mhm.
Many people believe they exist, and I can't prove with science.
So what does it mean to prove with science? That's like,
No science. I can prove because I have my intelligence, my knowledge. I can prove in general way that the Earth is flat, is round. It's the same about Galileo Galilei's about how is it if the sun around the Earth or the Earth around the sun. We have proofs, evidences.
You can see it. It's a
My
physical
knowledge.
object.
It's
right?
my knowledge, but about something is not real, not physical, not tangible.
Okay. Okay. So this is good. So we have the
It's
environment.
ghost. It's ghost. One angel.
It's okay. It's okay. So we're gonna add it to this map. That way we can see it in relation to other things.
Mhm.
Making diagrams of stuff is very useful because you're using a different part of your cognitive mechanism, your
Uh-huh.
visual spatial sketch pad, instead of just the autophenomenological loop, which is where language is. It's hard to it's easier to spatially see things and then translate it into language after sometimes to make sense of it. So we have the being. Because this are for sure that you know you exist, right? Do you exist?
I think yes. The cart. I think so. I exist.
All right, so we got that. We got this. We're all going to say we exist. Do other people exist?
I think so.
There's a high probability, right?
My knowledge. I know. I can touch. I can see. I have my evidences.
Yes. It's a different argument from what me existing. Even though we're the same, I am myself, but you are the other, right? And so there's different justifications for the existence of the self, like me as a person, and then the other people, right? Because the other people are objects in some ways. Like I see the door there. It exists. Doesn't talk to me. You guys can say things, right? Because you guys have minds and you're people, right? So we got I exist, other people exist, and then we are all part of an environment. The environment exists, right? Some people are going to branch away from that and they're going to talk about the simulation. We're not going to go there, right? That's a hypothetical, non-justified argument. And there is no difference. She's smiling.
No, I'm listening.
It's good. I like that you're smiling. There's no difference between what I perceive as the environment and what someone might claim as a simulation. How am I supposed to know? I don't know. There is no difference. And the closer I refine my observations, I don't come to like the bedrock of simulation. I'm like, haha, I've got to the end of reality. It's like, no, that's not how it works. And it's never happened. And you tell me when it happens and we'll talk about it. But until then, the simulation is just as in the air as angels and ghosts. So what we're going to talk about is we have the environment, right? We perceive the environment. The environment is physical.
Is physical.
Okay.
Tangible.
Yes, it's material, tangible. You can measure it, right?
Mhm.
Now, angels and ghosts. So this belief is different than the flat earth belief because the flat earth belief, as Jose identified, would fall still under the physical category. So we could use physical means to determine whether or not it's a very flat penny, right? Or there's too many pennies, so you don't have pennies anymore. Or is it a sphere, right? So what exists aside from physical? I can see the physical stuff. Remember we went really slow here. I exist, other people exist, there's an environment. You are part of my, even though you're another person, you are part of my environment. Just as my body is actually part of my environment. The conscious being, right? The thing that's perceiving stuff, it's like, that's like an environmental factor, right? Like I perceive that. It's not part of my consciousness as an essence, you know? It's something that I am aware of externally to consciousness. So, and then there's levels of it. Then there's like the physical environment outside of my body. So we have this physical environment. So when you say angels and ghosts, well, now what? Where is that? Like if we go with this one, we were good so far. But then there's this person who's burning people at the witch, or they're burning witches at the stake, right? They're crucifying them, nailing them to a tree, and look at this fine gentleman. It's almost like a philosopher stumbled into the room here, like it was haphazardly. It's like,
Yeah, I was walking around the city of Athens.
Dimitri, this is Brittany. Brittany.
Brittany.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Brittany.
Oh, hi, nice to see you.
Nice to meet
Thank you.
Does he exist?
I believe so.
Just talk about existence sometimes.
About what? Season like this?
No, about
That's what I
existence in general.
If I say, I believe in angels, do you think I am crazy? But no, no, serious. I believe.
Not necessarily.
Gabriel, because it was my religion as a Christian.
Mhm.
So I think can exist, and they connect the two worlds:
Okay,
a parallel world and this world. And there's
okay,
a connection.
okay, so
It's my
It's a
let's go
theory.
with what you're saying here. So you have your angels, and then we have this parallel world,
Or parallel universe, you mean?
right? And there's a connection
Oh.
here. And then you said, I think.
I believe.
Sure, you can use the word think. So this is you, this is your belief, and the connection here is believe or think, right? Those things fall under the reasoning quadrant. The other quadrant would be the perceptual quadrant. Some people actually believe that they've perceived a ghost or God. That's a different argument, right? So I did the presentation on the existence of God. You were here for that, right? And the very first slide, I talked about how would we know God, right? And there's scripture, there's what other people have said. You could have like had a revelation, like God just came, like just ripped through space and time and was like, Achilles, you atheist. And it was like, and I just collapsed on the ground. I'm having a seizure. You know, from your perspective, you're like, he just fell down and started shaking. From my perspective, it was like, no. Time and space split like he parted the seas and punched me not into my brain, but into my soul. I felt it in the brain though, and I was on the ground, right? So you could say that. Maybe that's for people with near-death experiences, for example. There's a tunnel and a white light, and they have this sense of a presence, right? Maybe something speaks to them. Right? What's going on here,
I say
right?
that happens on DMT too, because like when you die, when you have a near-death experience, the brain releases a bunch of DMT. So they say that's what they call the God molecule, and that's the white tunnel at the end that you see when you die. I think God is talking to you.
Relax and corridor, many experiences.
I'm much more animated when I do the class this way. As you can see, it's funner than just like monotonously going through slides. But yeah, I digress. So, okay, we're going. So this is like as a methodology. This is a first principles method.
I'm sorry, what about Jose's question?
Yeah, I'm doing it right now. So the first principles method is just, we're being like Descartes. I'm gonna have a John Locke blank slate and say, I know nothing. What can I know? What are my first principles? How can I build up my knowledge to dispense of all of the stuff that I thought was real, but I'm not really sure, right? So let's just say nothing exists and start from scratch. Well, I at least know that I exist. Okay, that's
Do you
something.
really though?
Yes. And then we talk about other people. There's some evidence to think that there are people in this room. I'm not just talking to myself like in some weird place.
I heard about this argument. I actually talked to some religious, people. They say, yeah, from the logical point of view, you just cannot have that belief. But they say once you believe, you forget about the logic, but you just believe.
Yeah.
When you believe, everything makes sense.
Mm.
But if you try to have your belief from logically analyze, what the books talk about it, who creates what, you never get a belief. But it's a reverse process. You have to believe first, and then everything fall into its places.
It's like in the
I heard that kind of
But
argument.
something creates the belief.
So believe you cannot logically make. Sorry.
Okay, no, yeah, sure.
No, I was just saying something creates the belief. It's not like, I believe. Like there's like if you speak to like I am Christian, my background is at least. But if you speak to people who are very committed to like they have very personal experiences that they will think that has found, created this belief. So whether or not they're correct, how they come to the conclusion, But then that's their evidence that, you know.
In my opinion, usually someone has to go through something very negative, and when they seek out like that pillar of support, God or Jesus, whatever religion you want to name it as, that's when people usually become believers. Is when they don't have anyone else to resort to, and then they decide to reach out to higher power and put their faith or belief in it. That's when usually they become hardcore believers, usually through traumatic experiences or like.
So what is the thing that creates the belief? Like what's like an example? Obviously it's different for different people.
I believe it's a decision. Like
So
my
what prompts the decision?
acceptance.
That's why
Or-
accepting.
It's like for my personal example was I had done like extensive amount of research on well-being and mental health, physical health, and I tried implementing everything in the book basically, like working out, to diet, to understanding the nutrients in the body and what our brain needs to like be healthy, and like read about psychology so I can get over depression. I had tried everything in the book, and then I had a background in Christianity as well, and I decided to give it a try. And then after that, it's very weird how like my whole life
But you just when you say give it a try, like just apply principles of being a Christian.
started believing a little bit more.
How?
If I decided to believing in something that doesn't like basically without proof of it existing is
I understand without proof. So for example, the reason I'm asking this is like there'll be people who will be like, oh, this particular thing happened in okay, I'll give an example. When I was younger, I was at home. We lived in like an apartment complex. It was on a hill. So you come down the hill and then you go to the house. So we're in the house. My mom had just bought me a new pair of shoes. I was hopping over kind of this garage area to get into the car. The very brand new pair of shoes burst, whatever. Maybe not the best example to give given the stereotype, but anyways. Yeah, but anyways, so the time it took for me to like go inside, fix the shoe, whatever, we got to the top of the gate and there was police like pulling tape across our gate. We live in a very good area, but it's very unusual thing that happened. There just been like a shooting there. So my mom was like, whoa, if we had been, you know, if we hadn't hopped over, whatever, the shoes hadn't burst, whatever would have been right. The timing of it would have been right there, whatever. For my mom, this is a miracle. So stuff like this, it's what faith is built on. So that's why I was asking if there was a similar example that you kind of could point to.
Miracle.
Oh, at that point, like probably hundreds of examples that I guess once you train your eye to see things like that, like it's a fine line between like being delusional and like thinking everything is a sign, like, oh, that happened, that's because of that. But it's like it's your intuition, it's a feeling you get that where you I guess you can kind of like in your scenario, like divine presence in a way, or like divine timing. Where if it happens like once, okay, it's a coincidence. If it happens a few times, still a coincidence. But if you see the pattern repeating and it's always something like that, I guess it reinforces that belief. I wouldn't say it would make you believe in that one, like in those incidents alone.
I like the way you explained it. That was very well done, right?
What did I explain?
You explained the
scenario.
event that precipitated like
Oh,
the belief
okay.
in the thing. You did a good job. Okay, so the problem with it though is there's so many people that are suffering that are like begging and praying for a miracle and it just doesn't come. Right? And so we have this selection bias where we pick out things because they stand out to us and we forget all of the times where it didn't occur. Right? And
So they will say that because it didn't work, it's because God has a bigger plan.
yes. So what's going on now is that's one of the fallacy things. Is so we're going back a couple steps here. When the belief is more important than the process of reasoning, and that's what Dimitri's move was. Is that I'm just going to let go, just believe in it, and just see what happens. And that's fine. It has a function. It's like religion. We kind of have an evolutionary predisposition to be religious because it's helped us survive to some degree, right? But it's very close. Like we just go back to the problems of today, right? Cancel culture, the woke mind virus, and that if you deviate from these norms, you can have all of these negative consequences occur to you.
Right.
Because the group is not the philosophy society. The philosophy society, you can disagree with me. You can even tell me to fuck off. I'm like, all right, well, what did I do? You know what I mean? You're being reasonable. It's like, oh, okay. If I was being an asshole, then I would understand. You know what I mean? But you can't really be reasonable with a religious belief. You have to be faithful. That's what it requires.
So you mean the difference between a philosophy society and that religion is that because to you the highest principle is be reasonable, because you just say
Yes.
they don't let you to be they think belief is more important, but here be reasonable. Reasoning is most important for you, for the society.
So my principles come from this first principle methodology. I know that I exist as a being, right? And so like in like February or March, I was discussing, there's two axioms that I have. One is the conscious being axiom, which is your whole psychological profile and how it functions. And then the sociability axiom, that we're part of a social group. And those two things together, we can make sense of stuff. And that's fundamentally what the Philosophy Society is about, to teach you how to navigate your life on your own, but then also do it at an institutional educational level, right? So there's the belief, right? This is a content. A belief can be true or false. And so the only way to know which one it is, if it's a belief about the most important thing, like let's say you had a child, right? You're like, yes. With the right person, yes.
Double win.
Yes.
And the child's healthy.
Triple win. And then like you go into one, like you're not at home, you're in some place, and you go into a room, and then you believe that the child is over there. We'll assume that the child's the most important thing. We're just gonna throw that out there. Or let's say that you have a lot of money. You really love money. You're like, this is the best thing ever. I love money. I know people like that. They love money. You know, the accumulation of wealth is the most important thing for them. They would believe that their money is safe in a certain place, just like the child is, right? Like a bank account or in stocks or whatever. And if that's the most important thing, that's specific content, like whether or not that marker works, I believe it probably does. But if it doesn't, it's like, whatever, I'm going to throw in the garbage. Like, it doesn't matter to me. But there's some beliefs that really matter. And if it's the most important belief, doesn't it matter that it's true?
What do you mean by true?
I mean, true to you? Or
What do you mean by
in
true?
general?
Just it's factually true.
Factually true.
Like, it's not true to me. Like, that's the perceiver. That's your, like, that would just be you. Your ability to correctly identify its truth. Just like if I'm like, that's a, like what letter is that? It's a B. Is it true to you that it's a B, or is it an 8?
In
It's
English,
like, well,
it would be
it's a B. Like, that's what it is.
in English. Now, if someone was
In Russian or something like that, it's a different, but that's what you're doing. So
perception. What is that?
that's one of the reasoning fallacies. You're reframing
Hmm.
the belief. You're doing some technique to say, instead of me being from this orientation, if it's false from this orientation, I'm going to move myself to this orientation to make it true. But then you're like looking at, that's like me writing the word upside down, which I don't even know how to do.
But wouldn't it be like perception based? Like depending on perception, like certain beliefs, like of course there's certain like standard beliefs, like gravity exists.
Yes.
Like that's a hardcore
Yes.
true.
How do you
belief.
know? You what? You're saying this, you're telling me something. Okay. I'm a perceiver. How do I know what you're saying is true? Do it again.
Kind of sorcery.
But who is the owner of your beliefs?
You.
No, I think it's some powerful people in society. There is no conspiration.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I see where you're going
some
with this. I
society
see where
with
you're going.
medias, we have many tools to take all your beliefs, and I am so powerful to make inside you these beliefs.
You're talking to the warrior of beliefs right here, my friend. I have an arsenal of weapons to give you power over your beliefs. I'm just like a warlord now. I'm like, you want some guns? I'm like, I got a whole trunk full of guns here. And you're like, don't worry, and I'll just give them to you for free.
What about the spread of false information?
1 second. Okay.
Like, I was relating to.
You may not be the owner of your belief if you do not utilize reasoning.
Mm.
If you have psychologically been influenced by a variety of ways,
So psychology.
okay, and you're not self-reflective and you don't use critical thinking to say, is this belief real? Right? If there's no process of self-evaluation where you say, is the earth round?
So,
But I have tools to manipulate your beliefs.
Media.
Yeah, you can try. You can tell yourself that and you can try, but you
Education, high schools,
sure.
doctrine, for example. I have many tools in my society
Mhm.
to make my slave.
Okay,
Beliefs is the connections
Yeah.
between you and me.
okay, so let's do another one. So there's all these people, right? And they have like beliefs 1 to 7. Okay, and they believe that. And there's like the powerful wow thing over here. And it says these are the beliefs you're gonna have. Right? Whether this is marketing, McDonald's,
Social conditioning.
whatever, Trump, Biden, Harris, whatever. Okay. Assuming you have a sufficient level of cognitive capacity, i.e., your prefrontal cortex works, the front part of your brain where reasoning is housed, you haven't suffered severe brain damage, you don't suffer from delusional disorders like schizophrenia, right? Like as long as the faculty of reasoning, this little, it's like you're walking around with water in your hands. That's what being reasonable is. And someone could knock it over and then, oh, you lost it. Or you lose a hand. You're like, nah, I can never be reasonable again. That's what it's like. It's the most fragile thing that you have is your mind. Okay? I'm making an assumption. If you have a mind that functions correctly, right? Because mental illness is a thing. That's when the mind doesn't function correctly. If you have a mind, then you are a distinct entity from these people and from this. You are your own being. And within that being, there are modules or processes or skills, things that you can do to know your environment and to know what your beliefs are, if they are real, or the how to proportion your trust in the belief. You're like, maybe. You gonna give me $100,000? No. Right?
Right. Mhm.
But if I said, how about I give you a $2 million house? I just want 100,000. You're like, okay, here you go, brother. Take it. Take the, of course I'm gonna make $1.9 million on your stupidity, right? Or whatever it is.
Mhm.
So the problem with this is that when you make the belief, which is not even a thing,
What do you mean it's not a thing?
like for example,
It's like
we can all
self-created.
visualize something in your mind. You can have a representation in your mind. We can all just think of some random shape with a color. Very random though, not a square, like sort of squiggly, and then some color choice. Right? If all of us do that, and then my head gets cut off, my representation, does it exist anymore? No, it's gone forever. It's never coming back. I even forget what the first one looked like because it was so random, and I squiggled it down, like that one's gone. Okay? Your belief, if you have all of these people and like some tragedy occurred, right? Like we see cultures that are destroyed, like the Mayans and the Aztecs, the Sumerians. We have some writing left over, but predominantly their beliefs kind of died with them.
Mhm.
Right? So the belief doesn't really matter. What matters is you. That's a belief. like, that's why this is, can be self-contradictory, because you can look at what I'm saying as self-referential, and then it doesn't make sense. But that's philosophically unsound, and I don't want to go into it right now.
What's self-referential?
It means that when I'm telling you that you matter more than your beliefs, that is a belief.
Hmm.
So what I'm saying is also referencing itself. It's a problem of set theory, and it's a limitation of language. This is like analytic philosophy.
What,
Very late nights, you're like, Achilles, why do we do this? I'm like, it's because we have to. So, yes, Mr.
what if, because what I heard, because I discussed this with people, but what I heard from them is those believers is that you just cannot use logic. You believe something beyond something that's different. That's another territory. You believe because, first of all, God, you cannot understand God fully, because if you understand God fully, you're God, right?
Okay,
So
sure.
there's some parts of God you just cannot understand. Look at Jobs, like what happened to Jobs, right? So you just cannot understand. So belief is something like the angel. It's like a
Personal belief, right?
yeah. It's a very And then if you say, oh, what is this? How can it's you just cannot use your reasoning. Belief is something different than reasoning. What's your?
But
I would just say that is just false.
understand
It's just not
it's
true.
knowledge. It's
Hmm?
something. It's knowledge. It's your cortex, neocortex. It's your. But for example, at the end of this class, I believe there is 3 societies: the free, the philosophy, and the council.
Yes,
Because
okay.
you have, so it's not personal, the
No.
capacity to manipulate my mind. Because I consider you a very wise, a psychologist,
Thank
a PhD, a very high level, and I consider me ignorant. In this case,
Well, I don't consider it that way.
no, but no, it's one example. No.
Okay.
In this case, at the end of this class, I believe there's a free and philosophy and council,
Yes,
for example.
sure.
I believe because I receive information from one in other level in my humble knowledge. For example, another one said, no, cancel cultural, it doesn't exist because we are in a free society, for example. Perhaps I believe in the other one because it's more, but story. They can convince me. So where is the real truth when you believe?
Okay, I'm gonna get to that. Let's just continue with this one point first, and then we're gonna get to that. That's like the end place. We're gonna do this first, though.
Can I reply?
Okay.
Before I get my insight. The best thing to do is to acquire knowledge from different types of sources with people with different beliefs, and to view all the beliefs out like on the table. Like, those beliefs this. Elon Musk believes that. This guy believes that, and like there's a few contradicting points, and then you use your own reasoning to kind of see which one, I don't want to say applies to you, but which one makes sense to you.
Sure.
Right?
Well,
Kind of.
I don't want to go down the subjective rabbit hole.
Hmm.
Because that's already assumed in the process of evaluating stuff, because you're the one trying to figure it out.
The research.
But if you're in this society, it depends on your society. No, it depends on you.
1000%, yeah.
Okay, here, I'm gonna steer the ship back. Let's just go back here. So there's the person believing, and then there's the content of the belief, right? So the belief is in here. It's inside your head. If you have, like, for example, people that are suicidal believe they should kill themselves. Should they do that? No. Don't do that. That's a mental illness. It's the wrong thing to do.
Sometimes they believe there is another paradise.
Hmm.
It's not mental. It's very intelligent,
No.
but they believe it's a better life.
Yeah.
After.
Sure, but again, what's going on here? Remember, we did the first principles thing. I gave like a taxonomy or an understanding of like metaphysics, you could say, that I exist, you guys exist, there's an environment. I have certain axioms that I'm going to build everything on. But the problem is that if you come into an understanding with preconceived notions, and then you're trying to fit. So you're like, God exists, and then there's angels, and then there's this dude named Michael who's super chill, and he has a buddy named Bartholomew, and these guys can all fly, you know, and like you create it that way. And then there's also witches, and they got burned, right? But they didn't scream because they were the devil's children. Like that went down a real dark road, like the Spanish Inquisition. Dodgy, you have a point. Sorry, before I forget.
Thank you, Achilles. I just want to ask a question about, can a really strong belief that someone holds not truly be their belief, even though they hold it strongly? And I'm going to frame that same question through an example I have of an experience I went through. In my brief time as a Muslim, I've met people who are very strong believers. And because I was a convert, people introduced me to them. So when we would ask each other, why did you convert? Somebody would give me an example. I just opened up the Bible and it didn't make sense, so you chose the Quran instead. So for me, that never really made sense, especially given the extreme dedication they had to the religion, to an extent that you didn't believe. So I just also had another experience where a person would have a really strong belief in a religion, but for me personally, I believe it's just because they suffered mistreatment in their religious community that they kind of moved to this community, and maybe it is they're acting as a vessel for somebody else's belief in return for good treatment. So is it possible to have really strong belief based on weak foundations, where the belief is not truly your own, but you're trading it in for something else you want and you're lacking?
Yeah, well, you would be conforming to a certain belief system without actually like really owning the belief system. And you'll see that with people that are like religious moderates. They're like, I don't really believe in God. I just kind of go along with it to make my parents happy. And there's one thing is that there is a value structure here, right? I'm assuming a certain structure of values that, for example, like there is a value here. And if you don't care about this value, truth and like reality, the cosmos, those values come before any principle. The truth matters. The truth matters because one of my parents did not have the cognitive capacity to know what the truth was. Her brain just couldn't tell. And so she would lie to me as a child. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, 7. And you're like my parent, you know? And that is extremely confusing. And so that instilled the value of why truth is so important. For example, all those witches that got burned, maybe they just had schizophrenia, but it was still someone's sister. And is it fair for him to have to, like, come on, man. That's really bad. That's really bad. And it happened. And there are, like Dodgy and I had a discussion about unethical practices in the world. There are a lot of bad things happening today based on someone's belief.
Right.
And so there are many beliefs. Let's just change this diagram to like, these are different kinds of beliefs. And in the center, they're really important, and they can be very negative. You know, like this is negative, this is positive. So you can go down and they can be very bad beliefs. They can be harmful and they're wrong. And if you don't learn how to navigate the sea of belief, then you allow certain beliefs to just perpetuate and exist. That's not good.
Can we say, you just mentioned that, something bad happened because somebody has belief. I thought about, again, John Ross.
Yes.
Ross talked about freedom of conscience. So basically, people have freedom to believe what they want to believe, but it just they cannot punish some other people who doesn't believe the same thing as they do. So the problem is not about the belief. The problem is about you have to only believe what I believe.
Yeah, we don't want to go down that path because that's like a path of tyranny, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we just go back to the principle of philosophy society. One of them is to make sense of things, right? And we have a duty to each other and society to make an effort to understand each other. This is the mechanism I've established. Not this, but just I'm saying this will probably work. I found this little puzzle piece. I'm like, this will probably work. And it does. Empathy, right? I'm going to understand what you say. And if I notice that, like, if this is a good argument, they all kind of support each other, right? And it's strong. And then you have someone that says something like this, and I think it's going to fall over. It can't hold its own weight, right? But they're like, it's so important to me. It really matters. And I was saying, well, why does it matter to you?
One question. What do you place one prophet? I give you one example, Jesus. I believe I am Christian because one prophet have a connection with God, and I know he did miracles, the many actions, and finally, this prophet, I believe, because of Jesus.
Yeah.
So what do you place
It's
in the
okay.
cancel cultural outside?
Well, okay. So, all right. So two things. One is we have our axioms. This is true for almost everybody. Like, it's pretty hard to argue. Like, you have to be like a philosophy student or really like watch some videos and be like, I don't believe in reality. Like, you need to like, or I don't exist. It's like, okay, like, how far is this conversation going to go? Right?
It's a good conversation.
How do you
It's
say,
like, okay.
how do you say the famous Latin sentence by Descartes, the
Cogito ergo sum.
Yeah.
Cogito ergo sum. So, okay. Or no, is that it?
I think so. That's why I exist. What was it?
Okay, so wait. This is our thing here. You can create a different one though, right? You can say there's God, and then there's Jesus. This is a different reality. This is a different world.
No, Jesus is real.
Okay.
He was real.
Yes, there is
You
some
know
historical
Jesus.
evidence that there was probably a guy named Jesus, but there were probably many people named Jesus back then.
His name was Yeshua.
Okay. So the point is that, but whether he had magic powers is a completely different thing.
He did.
Okay, and that's fine, right? You can say that, like you can say that, but whether it's real comes down to whether it's true or false. It's still a belief, and you're saying it's true, and so the next step would be for me to say, well, how do we know it's true? Right? I know that you believe it. I know you're saying it's true, but how do you connect these two?
They would say you just believe it.
Yeah, well, that's the faith bond.
Well, but okay, so for example, sorry, can I talk with this?
Of course you can
Okay.
talk.
So if you think about miracles that say like when he had, I can't remember this, but like loaf and fish and whatever, and then he multiplied it. There are many witnesses purportedly to this happening, right? So based on what you're saying here, if many different people saw this, isn't that sort of some way to support that this actually happened?
Yeah, sure. Like, for example, a solar eclipse. Like, let's say there's like a kid who's never seen an eclipse before, and then it just occurs. And then like kid maybe was in the house. And the kid comes outside, he's like, what happened? Oh, there was an eclipse. And there's 50 people like, oh my God, we saw this thing. He's like, oh, really? Wow, okay, that's intense. I didn't know that occurred, right? But then it can still reoccur, an eclipse. And then the kid could see it in a few years or something like that, you know? The
There are
thing with
multiple miracles that many people saw.
sure.
Or thing they thought they saw, believe they saw.
At least it was written down that people saw it. Whether or not people actually saw it, we don't actually know that. There's a story though, because there's other stories like Zeus and Achilles and
In the homes?
Santa Claus. Like, there are many stories. Whether they're true is a different thing, right? And so people, you can write like Fred saw the sun. Does Fred exist is one thing that we can discuss, and whether Fred saw the sun or not is a different thing, right? Luke Skywalker killed the Emperor in Return of the Jedi.
So then,
So even though Luke Skywalker doesn't exist, it's true. You can think that the Emperor kind of came back because he rewrote the story, but it's true that he did kill the Emperor. Darth Vader did. Sorry, yeah, Anakin Skywalker.
so
But like Luke kind of fucked around with him, and then Anakin threw him down the thing. And so even though it's a fictional thing, it's still true within the confines of the story.
So for this model to work, we have to find some way to connect like basically some evidence that these people would be able to give us individually and separate that this thing happened. Well, first of all, that they even exist to be able to then deliver that evidence to us first to think it could have been possible. But I'm just asking
you're
this.
good.
Okay.
Very good. What you're doing right now is why we're here. You're doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing.
That confused me a little bit then.
Good.
Because
That's
in,
also
in a
important.
good way.
This is also important.
So we have these records that these things
Sure.
happened, right?
Yes.
And so we're questioning if those things actually happen. Like, how do we actually know, right? So how come? I mean, you can technically apply that to all of history,
You can put it to any written thing.
any written thing. So, like, how do we know we're in the year 2000 and we're not in the year 1020?
Well, I'll give you a different one. This is easier. Okay. So there's like,
That's a random example.
it's okay. There are like narratives, there are stories, right? And those would be in a specific time and a specific place. But there's also other analytic truths that are not bound by a time or a place. Like, for example,
Like math and physics.
bam, 1 + 1 = 2. And then you can do this move. You'd be like, oh yeah, Achilles. Well, guess what?
Mhm.
I'm going to look at belief from this side, and then belief looks like this now. Well, that's not belief. That's some other weird thing. Right? You can stipulate that 1 really means like pair, and the plus sign means like automobile. So pair automobile doesn't equal 2. It's like, okay, sure. You know, but you've completely missed the point, right? Because there is an assumed meaning behind this. And with that assumed meaning, it is true within that context, just like a belief.
Mhm.
You can't say that, oh, it's true to you. That's a sneaky way to say, oh, I dodged the bullet there. You know what I mean? But you really didn't.
So the belief has to be in the same context.
So
So you're saying like you're saying like the 1 + 1 = 2, and you're saying, oh, the 1 can mean something else.
you can do that's,
So-
that's not what, that doesn't make any sense.
Correct. But I was like, I don't know. I thought of like a fun little one
Sure.
with the 1 + 1 = 2. Excuse me.
Do your more, that's your marker.
Thank you. So 1 + 1 = 2 in the mathematical context,
Sure.
but in the artistic context, 1 + 1 = window. Sorry, I had to keep my mind down.
That's totally fine. Thank you.
So context matters.
Of course it does. Right? And so anyways, okay, so I'm trying to show you I'm trying to prove to you that a truth exists. I'm trying to just be like, that's a thing. Because if that doesn't exist, then you're a crazy person, because everything is based on that, right? And then I'm trying to say this other thing called reality exists. What does that mean? There's a consistent happening. Huh? Took me a second there. What do you mean by reality?
I was about to ask. Certain facets of reality are consistent.
Well, it's like, just like you said with gravity.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we can keep on doing it. It's the same thing. Right? And the cosmos is, quoting Carl Sagan, everything that ever was and ever will be is the cosmos. There is an order to, when I say reality, universe. There is an order to the universe that is within the bounds of time.
Who did create this order?
You're doing this thing again. What do you mean
It should be
create?
an
Where'd that
order.
word come from? We don't have that
Someone
word.
Superior.
What are you talking about superior? Where'd that word come from? We don't have that word.
Well, he's using, Jose is using reasoning, because for
Okay.
something to be there, you have to have a cause for that thing.
The first course.
Sure, you can, yes, you can say that.
He's using
That's
reasoning.
okay.
He's using reasoning.
But first cause fits within this, for sure. But creator doesn't. There isn't. We talked about that when we looked through the arguments of the existence of God. We're begging the question.
Mhm.
Even if there's a first cause, right? It doesn't mean that it had to be some guy who's pissed off at a town of people and is like, I'm just gonna kill everybody.
Sure, because you're
Like,
in
go fuck
philosophy.
yourself. Like,
In a philosophy, it's a society, totally agree. But what about a religion society?
oh well, that's
Religious.
not it's not, well, that's a different place.
But for you, but for me, it should be in the middle.
Yeah, exactly.
Religion society, what's your objective here? Is it your objective to be liked by everybody, to not get ostracized, to not be canceled?
No.
Like, what's the goal of your participation in that group, right?
Mhm.
Like, if you just want everyone to like you, then you just kind of agree with whatever they say. That's what people usually do. Or you be neutral. You just like don't take a position. You're like, hey, I believe in Jesus. Whoa. I'm not going to get in an argument with you. I go to church. I'm a good person. No. Right? I don't want to make enemies. I just want people to like. I just want to belong. Just like don't leave me in the cold. Like there's an instinct for that, right? And then some psychopath was like, I bet you we can tell them that this because we got all the food, they'll just do it.
Uh-huh.
And then they did that. And then the story got crazy. They have an entire book. There's hundreds of pages. There's many books. Like there's a whole bunch of them. How do you know which book is the right book? Why does it have to be a book? If God really existed, why would he waste millions of, or not millions, but hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years on our species until we got to the point where we could have language? If God can give you the capacity of vision, where I can know the chair exists because I can see it, why wouldn't God give you the innate ability to know his existence, right? Why would there be the necessity, if you're all powerful, to have any book at all? It doesn't make any sense.
But what if he actually did? That's what they have the hieroglyphs. Like the Aztecs, they have different interpretations of that energy.
I think you're doing this thing again.
No, really. You said
You're
why would
putting
they,
belief on its head.
wait? You said why would they wait until humans had the capacity of language and writing?
Yeah.
Or well, before that, before the language and writing, like,
Exactly.
their method of communication was through, I guess, more simpler language and drawings. That's how
Sure.
they would depict their stories.
Yeah. Like, where was the Christian God then? Like, what was he doing? He's like, it's not time yet. Christopher Hitchens says this. He's like, God just sat around for millennia, letting people suffer and eat each other and do crazy things. And eventually he's like, I'm going to say something now. Now it's too much for me, right? Like chimpanzees go to war with each other, whole entire tribes, and they cannibalize and there's infanticide. Like we were basically just like that and still are in some parts of the world. Like remember that human rights thing? Human rights exist. Why? What are the two things we say? Because we enforce it. I wrote it somewhere. Because we enforce it and because of something else. It's explicated. You say it, right? So then why, if God is such a good being in essence, just like gravity, you can't think of the cosmos without gravity. Can't. You can't think of time unless it's all part of time. There is no times, there is just time. Just like space, there is space. Manuel Kant. So why isn't God just God? Why is there confusion more than anything we've ever known?
You have prophets again.
Okay.
Prophets.
Did they do a good job? Why are there more than one of them?
How many businesses?
How? Sure, that's true. That's good.
Yes.
That's a good. But I don't even know if that's the prophet. There's a whole marketing company 2,000 years ago that they really did a good job, right?
They manipulate. We can call it again because to believe because of prophets.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to attribute that.
Historical and real man
Hmm.
is the connection between God and your beliefs.
Okay, well, sure. Okay, we're gonna steer the ship again. Unless you want to say something?
No.
Okay, we're gonna steer.
Can I say one last
Yeah.
argument? They say, okay, you asked. I noticed you asked. You start the question like why? Why God didn't do this a million years ago?
Mm.
What the minute when you ask why, you're already using the cognitive or reasoning capability. So they say that is also a belief. You believe in reasoning, just like they believe in something beyond reasoning. You believe in science. You believe in reasoning, science. reasoning is what behind science, right? So it's also a belief. You know, but what I heard a lot is that when they say, you know, when you believe in God, you just believe it. It's not something that you use reasoning to persuade you, because actually when you can believe, it's also designed by God, because it's not my effort make me believe, it's God's work. It's God, you know, knows when I will believe.
Then it's not even you. And that's just like God's inside of you, like an alien's inside of you, and it's like controlling you.
Yeah, like the evil person,
Homunculus.
like the evil person who did so many bad things. You know, he become a believer just right before he's going to die. You know, and then he still gets saved. You know,
Like if that's the case, then how is that different than being possessed by a demon? Right? That's where like the Christian justification is God gave you free will. So God doesn't have his hand inside you. He's like, no, I'm just gonna take my hand out. Whereas the devil's like, I'm putting my hand right in there. I'm like, you're like, oh my God, I'm possessed. Like it's doing crazy shit. It's like, maybe.
But is yours? Is you believe? Is this also you? Just another
Yes,
belief.
at this point, that's the set that includes itself. Right? When you talk about belief, that's also a belief.
Well, on something more realistic, do you believe in UFO?
Sure, there are unidentified flying objects because you just see a picture, like, I don't know what that is. But to say that UFO is an alien is one step too far. There's no evidence that it's an alien.
But if we exist here, can't you fathom that they're aliens? No?
Yes, we just haven't seen them yet.
What if they're undercover Russians?
No, but what I mean, if we have enough evidence to know that we exist here, is it so like? Is it such a leap? Like based on this evidence, can't we reason that there's another world like been created this way as well too out there?
Inductively. It's not because we've observed it, like there's a bag on the ground. Like I could say there's many bags in this room, therefore there's probably bags in the other rooms. Right?
Right. But like for example, if I have seeds and they fall and then they start growing, and I'm realizing that when seeds fall in the soil, they grow. And see, like the earth is like a seed that's fallen into the soil and grow. And has grown, can't we? Then isn't that enough? No, that's still not.
You're right, yes, but it's just the type of reasoning.
Oh, okay.
Right? So that there's deductive reasoning and there's inductive reasoning. Right? And so this would be it's probabilistic. It's very likely that there is life on other planets, but we just haven't actually seen it yet. Just like it's very likely, like if I stand here, I can't see the other rooms. It's very likely there are bags in there, but I can't see them right now. Right?
So from a philosophical standpoint, it basically comes down to like all these grand questions that we have of the universe and existence and God and whatnot. It all comes down to you believing in the theory. Because like Big Bang, for example, we don't have evidence that Big Bang happened, like it's speculations of theories.
Okay.
So you decide to believe in a theory for what reason?
Because it's the best explanation with the evidence that we currently have. And then what we do
Isn't that kind of like the belief? Like the
No, it's not. It's just that like if I know that there's stuff inside the circle, but I can only see that stuff, right? And then later I can see some more stuff, and eventually I can see other things, and then I can see like this thing. Right? That's kind of what it's been like for us. As we develop different tools and techniques, other phenomena come into view. And so when we say what's in the circle, what's your theory, or how do you account for this? It's contingent on what our observations are. Predominantly.
Imagine if I am blind, why don't I believe it's a circle? If I am blind.
That's a very good, and then maybe that's what I am. As an atheist, I'm just blind. But then why would God make blind believers? Like, why did he do that to me? I want to believe in God too, man, but I just can't.
Because
No,
you
it's
asked
not
why.
goes back.
What do I do with myself? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's a position.
Hey, first of all, why do you want to believe in God?
It's such a great thing. And you get to live forever, right? There's an afterlife. Anything you do that's wrong, God just takes it into his jacket and walks out with it.
So that's a utilitarism. You
Yeah.
thought about the good things, you know.
Yeah.
You didn't.
It's like a new car. It's like it's got no miles on it. It has air conditioning. It's a great buy. It's cheap. You know what I mean? Sure, I'll take it. Right? There's benefits to it, and that's how it's sold to you. Like we talked about this, like that's true.
It's sold to some people from a point of fear, actually, I would think. I think a lot of people believe out of fear.
Out of what?
Out of fear.
Oh, fear.
Like actually lots of Christianity, it's taught from a position of
Oh, the hell, the heaven, the hell.
like people are not, a lot of Christians are not, oh, I love the Lord. Oh my gosh. It's like, no, I don't want to go to hell. So that's kind of what's shoved down their throats.
And they were burned at the stake. They're like, they like, look at, we're hurting this person. Like, you know,
Yeah, that totally helped.
hell is worse than that. And so psychologists have this thing called terror management theory. So there's a
Terror?
terror management theory, which is what.
Terror management, okay.
And so that thesis is that we're in fear of our own death. And so we attribute these beliefs to God to manage that existential angst.
But can that also be linked to something? Sorry, I forgot your name.
Dimitri.
Dimitri said earlier, when he was like, "Oh, he's at wit's end. Let me turn back to religion."
Sure.
Like, 'cause I
Exactly.
feel it's
Yeah.
like many people fall into like this has to be. It's the only thing it can possibly be. You know, kind of thing when they're at the worst point in life. So I have to believe, like, there's no option.
Right.
There has to be a greater. Like, it's almost like people are too scared to fathom that they're really in this on their own, kind of.
Yeah, yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And I think that's how a lot of people, like, very similar to like what you were saying, kind of end up there. Not everyone, but I think.
People with addictions find themselves in that place, and some of them can get over their addictions, right? Really, really bad ones, and that's a good
A
thing,
positive thing.
you know. But when we get to like,
So you say you're atheist. Is that also a belief? Like, I believe in to be an atheist.
yeah, so it's a funny thing, but it's not really that. It's just that I don't ascribe to a religious belief. It's the absence of belief.
I feel like
You believe in reasoning.
Yeah, I'm.
So that's another belief.
correct.
It's just a different kind of belief.
It's different, right? I would say it's more advanced because it's not about. I have videos on this. I've done this talk before. It's not a content belief; it's a process belief. Being philosophical is not about like, I will only drink Coke. I'm only going to drink Coke. Don't mess with me. You know, it's I will drink liquids and sometimes I'll drink Coke, or I will drink liquids that are healthy for me, like water, right? But some liquids are not healthy, like alcohol. Cement. That's not, it's even a liquid. Like, oh. Okay. All right. So let's just. I'm steering the ship back.
Before we go there,
I'm lost.
we
You know,
steer.
well, we talk so much about that. What is it?
I'm going back to this.
to do this cancel culture.
Cancel culture. We're at cancel culture.
One second,
Okay.
1 second. Back with
Okay.
the theories when we were talking about earlier, where you said you want to believe in that theory, since we're saying like these are all theories. So I believe there's two theories: a theory that I believe God exists and that He doesn't. Right?
Well, it would
And then
just,
you do
yeah,
research in each.
you can
section.
frame it that way, but it's that, yes, that's like the agnostic versus the atheist kind of discussion, right? And really, it's just that I am not going to accept that belief because there is not evidence for it. I'm not taking the step.
into
It's not like no step doesn't exist. Like there's no such thing as no step.
Mhm.
It's just I take steps or I don't take steps. But I can't like put my foot through the floor. It doesn't make sense.
So from a philosophical standpoint, wouldn't it be proper to do research, like extensive research in both aspects as to like the reasons why God doesn't exist?
I'm literally giving you the short, simple answer.
Okay.
You exist.
Yes.
You know that. Other
Yes.
people exist. There's an environment. And anything you think, if you don't perceive it, is a linguistic belief, which means that it has to go through the filter of reasoning.
Mm.
And so angels and Michael and all that stuff that you've been told, everything, it goes back to Plato's allegory of the cave. They drew these little squigglies on the wall and you were chained and you saw this your whole life. And then the chain broke and you went through the process of enlightenment. I'm coming back into the cave right now and I'm saying, maybe Christianity wasn't correct. And I don't want to hurt your feelings, but
No, it's great. I like
Like,
controversial
Yeah.
opinions.
Yeah,
It's great discussion.
We're mature.
I'm totally open. I think sometimes why I don't believe in Ateneas or Apollos.
Sure.
Romans or
Yeah,
Greek
sure.
gods.
Yeah.
Because God is transformed, is a mutation from every society. And in my society is God. But in 1,000 years later, should be another God.
Okay.
It's clear. So I accept.
Like you mean God evolves and changes?
Sure. It's the same idea, but it's
I mean, our perception of him.
even
evolves.
the Old Testament. If you read Old Testament, it's totally different
Different
for
God.
the New Testament.
Yeah.
It's another God.
But let me see your reasoning. I understand you're coming from I exist, they exist, the cosmos exists, but they will say that doesn't prove God doesn't exist. Even I believe in God exists.
Yeah.
I can still say I exist, you exist, the cosmos exists. It doesn't violate each other.
Yeah. Okay. So I gave a video. It was like 12 minutes long, just before I did just before Daji did his presentation. And I said, these are 6 principles of the Philosophy Society. And one of those principles was the onus of proof is on the one that makes the claim. So I have proven these things. Well, I sketched the proof. We can go through like rigorous philosophical proofs, but that's not the point right now. The person that was talking about God has not proven it. Right? They have used these other techniques, these psychological mechanisms to scare people, to coerce people, to get people to conform, to meet certain needs. All of these things except for proving it. Why? Because you can't prove it. And I went through all of the major arguments for the existence of God like a month ago or something like that. It's online. And because it can't be proven, they don't try, right? Unless someone has seen it. They're like, to hell with all you people. I've been across the mountain and I've seen the river. You're like, no, you didn't. There's no such thing as rivers. We're in a desert. The water doesn't exist. And you're like, what are you talking about? Right? They have like Achilles collapses on the ground and just starts shaking. Right? And you're like, is he gonna die? And then but I'm like, yes. Because God like splits time and space and says, you're an asshole, and punches me in the brain. Stop fucking with my Christian. You know? And I'm like, no, man, I'm gonna keep on doing it. Right?
You cannot prove it.
I'm being funny.
I know
I think
you
it's
are.
important to
It
be
is.
funny. Because it's like
So you said we shouldn't waste time on things we can't prove? Is that what you said? Or no?
kind of, but no, like okay, so you want to proportion your belief to the evidence. So if there's no evidence for something, it doesn't make sense to believe it. Like ghosts. What evidence do I have for ghosts?
I mean, they have methods of trying to prove it.
Okay. Like what?
Like those speech box thingies.
Oh, yeah.
I don't believe it. I don't know what it
Okay.
is. I don't have done the research, but
Sure. Like those
It's
little
something.
electromagnetism detectors, right?
yeah.
Which doesn't make sense. Why? Because all of the wiring in a building
Mhm.
is based on electromagnetism, and that would be throwing off the meter. Right?
Mhm.
Anyways, that's the point.
Okay,
We gotta steer it back. We gotta go back.
The most
But
recent
they will
version was
challenge
speech
your
box.
very original principle, which is whoever make the statement, they have to prove it.
Sure.
They say why we need to accept that rule. Is it a rule that it's
Because you're bringing the claim to me. Why do I have to accept the content? The only reason for me to, if you can't, like, when you bring a belief, right, you have to have an argument. If A, then B. If B, then C.
like a mathematics?
Therefore, A equals C.
You have to have like a mathematics. 1 + 1 = 2. 2 + 1 = 3. You have to have when you try to solve you have to
How
have
do we know it's true? Just because you said so? Just because there's an apple in my hand?
But sometimes you don't need argument. If you have authority, your parents, your church, is you're in the church, the people with authority,
Mhm.
full powerful people above anywhere,
Yeah.
they can't also create beliefs.
Right. Yeah. This is what I heard actually from what you said. They say, ask this thing. They say, okay, yeah, this is a very good question. You can ask God. Tonight, you pray. You ask God this kind of question, Tell me why I cannot believe in you. What evidence you exist? If you truly pray, God will make a miracle on you. Something like that. And then and once you believe, everything just, then you don't, everything's fine.
Mhm.
That's what they are.
That's that same selection bias problem. There's someone being tortured right now that is praying for a miracle and it's not going to happen. Why does that person deserve to?
Or are they being tortured? What do they do?
There's an innocent person who's being
Oh.
tortured because they don't believe in God. Actually, there's enough people on the planet that at this very moment someone is dying because of this.
Because of what?
Because they are a heretic or a blasphemer in the Muslim religion, for example.
Oh.
Right?
Are those extremists?
Sure.
Or
Or for a political reason.
you said this is a selection bias.
Selection bias is when you focus on certain positives and you exclude certain negatives. You're selecting certain data over other data. Right? It happens in sampling for studies. They'll pick out a specific population, find a correlation there, but it's unrepresentative to the entire population. And so some people,
What's wrong with
or
that?
confirmation bias.
What's wrong with that?
The study.
Like they say, stay positive, because it's all subjective. If you all just
Science.
looking at, you're creating a world. It's just, what's the problem with selection?
No, you're talking about belief.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I thought you were talking about the study. Like,
They even have they have explanation for jobs, right? Like job undergo or work all kinds of torture, right? And then, but he still believe in God, And then once he's believe, then
it's just a foot
fine.
belief.
Yes.
Like you'll find every way to rationalize if this is the way that you're seeing. If something's not making sense, then you'll twist it so that
yeah. They can rationalize
So this is-
everything. They can make sense of everything.
I don't know.
There-
Rationalize.
No, you're correct. Yeah.
Like in my-
There are I have other videos where I explain this. I put truth up here. Right? So this matters to me. Some people, they only care about not any belief, but a specific belief. So maybe this is what matters. Or Jesus. And so that would be above truth. So it doesn't matter if it's true or false. And anything that it would even allude to it not being true is dispensed of. And any person that would allude to it not being true is dispensed of.
But they will say what is the truth? Everything's subjective. Even I play video games all day. It is true to me, even though maybe it's a fake, but if I immerse myself totally into it, if I got brainwashed like North Korea, whatever,
VR.
Yeah, VR, so it's all subjective.
Because you technically have a
It's-
second
yeah.
life if you think
I
about
don't-
it.
But
Somebody-
it
some-
fits
some-
within
some-
the model.
Hmm?
What you're saying doesn't fit within the model.
The first principles model, right? And also there's two things. One is there's you as the being, and you can, as long as you have capacity, you can distinguish yourself from other beings, your beliefs, and you can be in touch with yourself and reality, right? And you can evaluate your beliefs via critical thinking. Then there's this first axioms thing, and then there's the sea of belief. And we want humanity as a species to get good at detecting truth and being accurate. It's important for us. Why?
We.
Like humans. We as humanity.
So we as humanity want this.
I think so.
We know we want this.
I'm saying I think so. What do you think?
Okay, I'm just asking.
I think it's important. Why? Because because I'm assuming this thing. Remember? Reality. Because okay, what's something that I want right now? The stand, if you just take money, okay, let me use that stupid example. Okay, I want money. Occur. Okay, maybe I did the wrong. Sorry, no, I didn't do that correctly. I'm gonna try it. It was the wrong. You're all making me uncomfortable, and it's screwing up my magical powers. I'll try something else. I want a McDonald's burger.
If you keep on saying it to yourself, eventually you'll get that burger.
So the lack of it occurring when I am intending for it to is the greatest evidence of reality. And religion tries to say, you can't see that. No, don't look over here. Whoa, 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 whoa. And they have this like faith game. They're like, look at me. Like, just have faith. Don't worry about it. And then eventually you just die. And you're like, I give in. Yeah. And remember we said, if you cut off the head of the believer, what happens? The belief is gone. It doesn't even matter anymore. But there is a problem. You spent your entire life with this questionable belief, and this is influenced by this. And it is important that this is true. Like, there is the thing that you can feel better, but there's a different way. And that's what I'm trying to do with this as well, right? Teach people how to be mentally healthy, how to have meaning in life, how to be together and not be an asshole, right? Because some philosophy students are like, man, fuck you, and they just dicks to each other, and that's not very cool, right?
Emotional.
We should learn to be able to disagree and understand each other, like with empathy and these kinds of things,
Right.
you know?
You said as a human, we are evolving to
Yes.
a better society. And what about as a human, we are dying. It's a new human.
Say that again.
Are we though?
If we're dying.
We're dying?
Cro-Magnons, Neanderthals,
Yeah.
humans, for example.
Oh, like the
You-
Homo sapiens is dying for the
Homo
new
sapiens,
human.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, but
We are
that
a
like,
new level, and as humans,
yeah, sure.
once is a new, we can consider, we are animals, okay, but we can consider as a global man.
That's what
Global.
Nietzsche's Overman is.
Globalization create a global with a different God and different beliefs, societies. What do you think? Do you think humans is forever?
Well, we're always changing, and our existing state, it depends on technology too,
Technology.
you know, because we're like Neuralink has 2 patients now. And Elon Musk makes very good arguments about how many bits per second that we can process. And AI could be processing a terabyte of information per second. And he says that if you're communicating with AI, it would be like talking to a tree. How slow we are. Like, how much information per second can you process? Like 1 word per second or so, like something like that? Or 3 words per second? Like, how much can you really do? A computer or AI will be able to process very, very high amount of bits per second. Not even bits, it could be terabytes. And so his objective with Neuralink is to integrate us with so that we can be at a similar level to AI. Anyways, okay.
Do you think technology will bring us further away from being human?
Well, that's just maybe what it is, our technology, right? So we made it for us. We made it for our bodies. I can, like, this has a screen because I have eyes, right? That's the only reason why it's there.
I think it's called transhumanism. Is that what it's called?
Okay.
Where eventually we'll become more like robots and we'll be humans.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Like way of being physically through, I guess, Neuralink.
Okay.
But kids,
We have to come back to the beginning because we're getting to the end.
Yeah, what I think. Because talk about social bias, selection bias.
Yeah.
But we notice in the society, you know, a lot of people they don't you know, they on the other side. They don't use it as reasoning. But they seems, you know, kind of, they even have a supporting group, look at all the religion, you know, they got other belongings, you know. They, you know, I sometimes feel, you know, the critical thinker group are much smaller than all the others, you know. So you're talking about, so the question is, what's wrong with this social selection bias? You know, people just, they still, you know, they got business, they hang around pretty well, you know, they got family, you know, but
Okay, I'm going to wait a minute because I'm going to bring it all back to the beginning because I had a certain.
You're staring continuously towards cancel culture. I'm not sure how close you got to the, like, it was like
We kept on steering
Fun.
and the boat winds just
The tide is strong today.
Sorry.
It's okay.
That's the beauty of it.
It just requires a skill gap.
So there's one universal truth.
Reality exists. That's how I say that. And then we can try to understand it with language.
I believe the universal truth that everyone on the planet that they can agree on is science.
no.
Math, physics,
Everyone doesn't agree on it. Can agree on it.
What do you mean?
We just spent the whole time talking about
About
it.
math or 1+1 =
About
2?
religion.
No, not about religion. Think everything except for something you can agree on. I'm sorry, you can only agree on science, and everything else there will always be disagreements.
Well, no, like there is disagreements within science, but science as a process is something that we want
But what
to.
about
Or the fundamentals of science.
trusting the science?
What about if you?
Yeah, we need to like, there's the method of science, and we need to like, it goes back to the axioms.
I was being a bit tongue in cheek.
Okay, I know, but I stopped.
Maybe I should.
Okay, I'm steering it back. We're steering it back. Okay, so we have cancel culture, okay? And that was the main thing. And the reason I brought this up was if cancel culture has the power to ostracize and scapegoat an individual because they are exercising their free speech in the philosophy society, right? Then that can make me feel, I don't feel that way, but it can make, I see it's there as a hazard, but it can make someone feel that they're scared of talking about things because they don't want to be canceled. And so what do we do? Does the philosophy society just shut down and we let cancel culture and the woke mind virus take over? Which is akin to allowing the great witch hunt burn people at the stake because they just don't like them. It's the cancel culture is really contemporary witch hunts. Right?
Mhm.
It's you're getting burned on social media instead. And people suffer, like they're not melting and then they're dead, but you know, there's consequences. So what is the difference between these two social groups?
Is cancel culture only Western?
No, I don't think so. Like it's the same kind of phenomenon occurs in religious groups too, right? It's ostracizing, scapegoating, the mob mentality, groupthink. Whenever there's a deviation from the norms or value, that person is deplatformed, for example, or removed from society. Their free speech is taken away. They're decredited. They lose their jobs. There's all these every way they can be hurt socially. That's what cancel culture does because it's a deviation from norm. So some examples was like DEI, but the trans discussion, right? Or gender dysphoria. It could be religion. It could be, if you're in Russia, it could be like a discussion about Putin, right?
But the people will say, just in devil advocates, people will say there's also a line for free speech. For example, hate speech. Hate speech, would hate speech still fall into the free speech?
Hate speech is the intent to cause harm, whereas free speech is about expressing things you're aware of that are inquisitorial, like observations of the environment without the intent to cause harm. So there's a difference between feedback and bullying. Feedback is supposed to be constructive so you can grow, whereas bullying is malicious. So the difference between these two is that cancel culture puts their beliefs at the top, not the truth, which is the same thing that religious groups do. And that's a hazard. Some churches may excommunicate a person because they don't have the same understanding of religious information that they do, right? And so what do we say to these people? We say, I challenge you to the truth. And I want you to not get upset. And if you do, we can talk about how you feel, but to figure out how to communicate in a way to understand each other. So we're going with the value of empathy, understanding, truth, and we're going to have a mechanism to arrive at that because I might be wrong or I say something that's inappropriate and it's my job to accept responsibility for that, right?
Mhm.
Even if it's unintended to some degree. I didn't intend to cause harm or make somebody uncomfortable. And if I did and they make me aware of it and it's within my control, I can say, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for that to happen. I'm going to be mindful next time and I'm not going to do it again. Right?
Aristotle has a saying, I love my mentor, but I love the truth more.
Yeah.
Being a student of Plato.
Yeah.
He said that. He said something
Sure.
like that.
Do you think as a humans is that, for example, a natural evolution. So at the beginning, we have this cancel cultural, and we evolve to for a tyranny to a democracy, ideal
Yeah,
democracy.
there's
And we need a revolution.
but it's already in the process. We're just in like the middle of it. Or I don't know if we're in the middle, but we're somewhere in there, you know? And so, yeah, that's what I want to talk about today because there was something brought up recently about cancel culture. And so now I'm addressing it. And so the process and methodology of the Philosophy Society is something that because cancel culture is not an entity, it's a social pattern that occurs within certain ideologies.
What about another
Right.
word?
Certain
It's called
groups of
a,
people.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
what about another word that kind of also associate? Political correctness.
Yeah, let's just try not to offend people. Right?
Offend people.
But
But if I say something under the free speech, I could very likely offend some people.
I've said stuff and knowing I'm going to offend people today. Why? Because it's honest and it's truthful. And their offense to it, I think, shows something about them, like the gender dysphoria case, than about what I'm saying. Like a phobia, someone who has a phobia of spiders or a phobia of like a specific kind of shoe doesn't mean there's something wrong with the shoe. There's something wrong with the person. They're the one with the phobia.
Claustrophobia.
That's really offensive
But they could say,
And then, so this is great. So why is it offensive?
to the person.
I know, but
Because people don't like feeling like defects, right? So they'd rather something else be the problem than themselves.
yeah, and that might be a reflective of their psychological disposition, right? That they're psychologically incapable of having a degree of self-awareness and accepting their own flaws.
Actually, I had a question about this one because you said something about when you're talking about the groups of people, and aside from people being like mentally ill or whatever, we have our reasoning, like we're walking around like this. So based on this, do you think that a sizable amount of the world is kind of mentally unwell at the moment?
Yeah, I don't think they're diagnostically well, I think there's actually a huge portion that meet diagnostic criteria. And one of the criticisms of the DSM is that many people, if not almost all of them, would meet some diagnostic criteria, you know?
Have you seen the graph? Sorry to interrupt. Of the rise of mental health issues, like the 80s.
Okay.
It's like skyrocketed past few years.
It just might be that we're actually just assessing more people. That it's actually just kind of relatively, it's been the same, but people are more willing to go and talk to psychologists and they're getting assessed. So,
but how do you distinguish this offense? Because somebody I say, because someone may be
we're gonna finish up because we're gonna put things on here.
racist. But he will say, if he say he says some racist comment, but he'll say it's because you have phobia. You're too sensitive. So how do we distinguish?
Because racism would be intending to cause harm to somebody, right?
But intention is really hard to know. Intention is in the mind, in the head. How do I know if
Yeah,
there's
so
intention?
we would
what?
discuss it, and like that's where it has to go to a different level
Mhm.
of a social interaction.
Mhm.
And you'll see certain people that are bigoted, right? That are like narcissistic or they're sadistic, like someone who's actually racist. They segregate a group of people based on ethnicity or pigment, and then they dehumanize them. So you would take that property and say, well, why are you dehumanizing me because I'm a person of color or something? Why are you doing that to me? Right? And then they would have to explain themselves. And what they might do, this is why it's a problem. They might do this technique and be like, oh, I'm not actually doing that. And just reframe it. And it's like, no, fuck you. You're fucking doing it right now. Don't try to fucking gaslight me and make me think you're not doing what you're really doing. You need to be real. And that's why the value of the truth is important, because it will take away a lot of the other issues in society. But if people are in the habit of putting specific beliefs above the process, then it could be any belief. It's just trading seats. And then we're the slaves to the belief. It's like, no, that's only led us into bad places. It may be good for some things in some instances, but we don't need it anymore. That's why I'm developing this whole program and and everything, because I believe, and I have evidence to show it, that's what I'm talking all the time.
Because I know this because the reason I noticed you use a word you like questioning, to clarify this.
Sure.
You say, oh, why are you doing this? Why you call me this? The minute you ask this question, you already try to enter a conversation with this person using reasoning, right?
Yeah.
You didn't say, because there's other ways to deal with a person, like in
Punch
human
on the
being,
face.
punch on the
Yeah,
face,
yeah, sure.
but instead of or even launch a war, if two countries have disagreement, there's another way is they launch a war to solve the whatever, right? But the minute you ask this question, you already try to use a reasoning, a conversation, a dialogue.
We've talked about this before, actually.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not a reasonable thing. Being racist is not reasonable. It's a psychological thing. And so when it shifts from being reasonable to, then I'm not a philosopher. Now I'm a psychologist, right? And I'm going to evaluate and assess your behavior and your thoughts, and we're going to do it together. And most people, unless they're mature, they'll narcissistically get uncomfortable and they'll do all those other reasoning techniques that you can see religious people do, but they just do it for their own self-justification of their bad behavior, right? They try to avoid criticism and stuff. Okay, that's it for today.
Oh, that's it.
All right.
Just
There you go.
longer, but.
See you guys later.